We're back, and today we're talking to Tom Spina, who I'm not even really sure what your job title would be. Prop master comes to mind, but you also started a couple of your own companies and you do recreations, restorations. So why don't you take over and kind of give an
Yeah.
idea of what your days are like?
At some point, I am going to have to come up with a title or like a description of what I do. I tend to fall back on like effects artist, and it's not that we're
Okay.
necessarily doing, film effects, but it's that type of art that kind of goes into just about everything we do, and that stretches from, like you said, we do have the two companies here. I say we a lot because there's 20 of us in the studio at all times, and I owe a lot to all of the great people that work with me on all of this stuff and really make me look good all the time. So I'll give them the credit. But the first company is Tom Spina Designs, where we do restoration of original film props. We do custom mannequins and displays for original costumes that were worn in movies. We do custom sculpture for things like trade shows, giant foam sculptures, 20-foot Statue of Liberty bust, these kind of things, rock work and theming and stuff for people's homes. And then also more traditional sculpture, things like bronze busts and wax figures and even, masks and monsters and things like that, which is how we kind of got a foot into the Star Wars world, doing cantina creatures and things like that, and Chewbacca's and stuff for Lucasfilm, for commercials and for videos and things like that, and appearances, even some stuff for the theme parks. And through that work and in describing to them some of the passions and ideas that we had, we were able to secure the license for doing home decor, replicas, be that replica props or replica characters or like life-size busts and things like that, and even replicas of artifacts that are in the Lucasfilm archives, things like the concept maquettes that were used to create the aliens for Return of the Jedi and stuff from Indiana Jones and all of that. And that was the nexus, the sort of nexus, but the little spark that became Regal Robot, which is, I think right now, maybe I'm more known for that in the broader Star Wars community, maybe than the other stuff at this point. Although for a while it was the other way around. But either way, folks at home can go and read the websites for days and see all the different stuff that our team gets up to. And it'll describe it a lot better than me going on forever. Like, okay, podcast over. Tom introduced himself. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Go home.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So there's so many directions that I could just start asking questions in. But I guess the first would be like to go way back, like
Yeah.
Tom as a kid. What got you into this line of work? And I don't mean like how'd you get the Star Wars license, but
Yeah.
were you always into sculpting? Were you always into making masks? Like what was the thing that kicked it off?
I mean, I think I think I was just always into making, nowadays it's called a maker, right? Like when I was a kid, it was like, there was always, anytime you had a show in the 70s, there was always a character named Tinker that would like do stuff, and maybe I'm thinking of like Speed Buggy, but there's a bunch of shows where there was always like that tinkerer character. There'd be 3 or 4 people doing stuff, and there was one guy that would always figure out like, oh, I could put this together with that, and that would make something. That was me, even at like 2. That
Okay.
was me. Little Tom was very much the same as what you see before you. And when Star Wars eventually came out, I was luckily still very young, and boy, did that make an impression.
I'm sure.
And it basically gave me, it went from me just being a maker and a tinkerer and somebody that would, I often would try to recreate things I saw on television, or, like old movies and whatever else. I was obsessed with the Wizard of Oz and stuff like that. Anything that was fantasy and creative and interesting, animation and things. I wanted to do 2-dimensional animation. I would sketch stuff. And then when I started to learn about the Star Wars films and stop motion animation and model building and creature work, oh, that was it. It was just like, oh, okay, even as like a preschool, or a grammar school age kid, I was gonna make the stuff I saw in Star Wars, and that was just it.
That's cool. I love talking to people who work in these creative fields and find their passion at that age, whether it's someone who's making comics or doing independent movies, or like you who's creating like the highest level practical effects. Um,
Thanks. It's
I guess you kind of explained it, but when you said that you're more of an effects artist, it's not computer effects. It's all
no,
very hands on. If you're getting value or entertainment out of any of my transmissions, it would mean a lot if you would join the Remnant and subscribe.
yeah, and I mean, it's a funny thing because there's a lot of computer in what we do now.
Oh, well, that
And
makes sense. Yeah.
in an interesting way, I grew up on practical effects. I loved puppets. I loved the Muppets as well. That was a big thing. So I would make like all these puppet characters and Muppets and things like that, like replicas of some and then my own characters. And um, in high school, we were always, we were always making movies, me and my friends.
Mm.
And it was always like the movie was just an excuse to do stunts or effects or blow something up or make a monster or whatever. But we were constantly like making short films or little snippet things or just like test footage almost of like, hey, can we pull this off? And at the time, there was the Amiga computer system and the Amiga 1000, which was called that because it had 1000 kilobytes of RAM, um, almost enough for a really good JPEG.
Yeah.
But back then, I was doing on that. I saw that as an opportunity because I was like, I always wanted to do two-dimensional animation, but I had no way to input it into a camera. I didn't have a camera with a stop, with a single frame advance. I didn't. The video cameras couldn't do that sort of thing. I didn't have the money to get film and process it anyway.
Mhm.
But with that computer, and there was a program called DPaint, you could do two-dimensional animation, like cell animation. If you kept the background the same, you could have a character move like a sprite. And I got really into doing computer stuff and trying to overlay the computer stuff onto video because there were some things called a Genlock that came out where you could do some of that. And this was all super low tech, but we at the school, we were really lucky, had a great teacher who let us push the boundaries, let me come in and stay through my lunch and work on projects and things like that. And so in high school, I actually thought I might become a computer animator. Um, but funny enough, the technology was frustratingly limited at the time and expensive and out of reach. And I didn't know, like, I wasn't one of those people like I could just pick up and move to California and try to go to ILM. Like you hear so many great stories of people who did that and just showed up and like, oh, good, we just need people, come in,
Yeah. Right place at the right time for sure.
Yeah. I wound up, it was the puppet stuff that actually took hold first.
Okay.
And I got my first kind of industry job was an internship at Sesame Street, and it was for Henson Company. Jim had just passed away, but it was just this amazing, amazing place, incredible show to be a part of. The creativity off the charts, but the people there, the family there, it was the same crew since 1969. And this was, 20 something years later, 23, 24 years. I think we were working on the 24th season. I'm sorry, 25th season. So this would have been 93 or 94, I guess. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that, hey, people really do creative things for a living. And it changed it from this is stuff that's fun and I'd love to get a job doing it, but I have no idea how. I'm in New York. I'm nowhere near all the stuff that gets done, to, oh, wow, here's, 150 people, 200 people, however many work on this show, that down the line, every single one of them is doing something creative for their livelihood. And it's right here. So that gave me, I think, the courage to pursue stuff that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise.
That's really cool to hear, because a lot of times it's, especially like as a kid, I would have loved to animate for ILM. Kind of a similar thing, computer animation. I can't draw so well, but that was a thing that like I was, playing like the LucasArts games. Like I wish I could go down that path. But that was in California. I'm in upstate New York. It's a different world. I don't have a connection.
Right.
It's not even an option. Forget it.
Yeah.
So the fact that you found it.
Pre-internet too, it's not like, nowadays, okay, I decide to drop everything and move to California. I've got a map in my pocket. I've got, connections to, I can find a hotel anywhere. I can find a place to live. I can find food. Like, you're literally, back then, you're going out completely blind, you know? And it's just such it just seemed like such a distance. And I don't know, I guess, the world really is smaller now because of that technology.
Yeah,
Um,
the things you were talking about as a kid, like always doing effects and making movies and these things, and your barrier to entry was so high,
oh, yeah.
where now every 12-year-old has an editing suite in their pocket that's a million
Right.
times more advanced than what
Oh
you
my
started
gosh.
on.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sitting there taking like Super 8 film that I can get 2.5 minutes of footage on. And like I have to send it out to get processed for a week. I get it back and I'm slicing it and taping it together, like it's and learning to do that without, like I had to try and find books in the library for that. Like we had no internet, we had no
Yeah,
YouTube,
you're
we
not
had
going
no,
on
no
YouTube
anything.
and
I'm old, is what I'm saying. I think I just threw a hip saying that. Hold on, but like it's amazing to me. Um, it's amazing to me that so many people of my generation actually got anywhere.
well, not only
And
that, but
yeah,
like set the foundation that the creators now are standing on.
yeah, and I won't take credit for that myself, but they're all the folks that are my generation that wound up at ILM and basically created modern CGI in the 90s. That is, like you said, that's the foundation for so much that goes on now. It all traces back to that, and it's if you can't tell, I just finished watching the Joe Johnston second season of the ILM
I'm
documentary.
behind on that. I got to get on
Uh,
it.
Spoiler alert, it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I had talked to Rose Duigan, who's
Oh,
featured very
nice.
prominently in that season, and she was really talking it up. So I got to get on
Uh,
it.
she's great. Yeah, yeah. That's excellent.
So your first industry job, you said, was Sesame Street. Was that
Yeah.
making puppets, controlling puppets, just kind of filling in gaps?
Getting coffee for the puppets, making sure that everybody was comfortable. Yeah, it was the assistant to the puppet wrangler was usually what they gave the intern to do. And what that meant is, the puppet wrangler is the guy who preps all the puppets in the morning for that day's shoot and says, "Oh, we're going to need Grover and Oscar and Ernie in this one," and then you get them all set up with the rods in their arms if they need them. You check if anybody needs repairs, and then you're handing them back and forth to performers as they're going, and you're maybe rigging if there's like they've got to hold something or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and basically just you're on standby and you're running around a lot and handing things back and forth. And what was great was the wrangler and the wrangler's assistant they're very much lumped in with the puppet team. So in between takes or when there was downtime or if they were shooting something that didn't involve the puppets, uh, our place, or at least my place, luckily was the Muppet Green Room. So I'd be back there with guys like Jerry Nelson and Marty Robinson and Carol Spinney, like just absolute legends of this of the field, and just picking their brains, hearing their stories, talking to them, and it was an unbelievable time to be there, and I'm really grateful for it.
That's a really cool first experience for somebody who wanted to do what you did. You weren't like an assistant on a soap opera where you're like, yeah, it's kind of close, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like making copies of scripts on like, some random TV show or something
yeah.
like a news program or something. Like, no, this was like the most creative and energized, entertaining place to be. And the puppeteers were all, wonderfully demented. And I say that as a compliment, just absolute characters, every one of them. And yeah, it was, yeah. So if you can't tell, I'm still like beaming about it. And that was, how many years ago? Don't say it. It's very long
Well,
ago.
yeah, it's just really cool that as a kid you wanted to do this thing. Your first industry job was the thing, and you're still doing the thing now, and you
Yeah.
still love it. So
What's great is it's also not a straight line. There's ups, there's downs. I did, more traditional TV work,
mhm.
technical directing and stuff like that for a long time. I worked in a toy store for a little while after the internship it's like you make ends meet while you keep, while you're trying to do your creative thing.
Right.
Um, so And I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade working in KB Toys for anything. That was also a special time because it was right when Power of the Force 2 was hitting, and to be there for that and to see, the resurgence of Star Wars and the resurgence of Star Wars toys for someone who was a collector as a kid, who had kept all his kids, all my figures from when I was a kid and everything. That alone was really cool. So yeah, pretty lucky all around, and kind of bouncing from cool thing to cool thing, and eventually making my way to my own thing, which was a really nice step. Which
While you were doing all the jobs, whether industry related or filling in the blanks, paying the bill kind of jobs, were you always still doing your own creatures, your own designs, figuring out your own path?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was nonstop. I wanted to learn. In high school, I tried to make rubber monster masks. I wouldn't even say try. I successfully made a bunch of rubber monster masks. But successfully might be in quotes because, but I was working with, high school art teachers who were used to teaching kids how to do ceramics. And
Mhm.
I'm sitting here, it's like, I want to sculpt the guy with the anvil shaped head that pops up in the cantina and looks around in the beginning of the shot. Like, and he's like, all right, you got a picture of it, kid, like one of those. And, didn't get a lot of feedback when I was working on that. And when it came time that I wanted to mold it, um, I was working out of Tom Savini's book. Tom Savini, famously the epic special makeup effects artist. Friday the 13th. Oh gosh, Creep Show. He's in From Dusk Till Dawn,
Yep.
famously.
I think
Um,
his school's still running.
oh, it absolutely is, and we've hired a bunch of people that went there.
Oh, very
Um,
cool.
but so his book was great, but you're still learning from a book, so there's an interpretation that has to happen.
Mhm.
And that book was written by a guy who inhaled a lot of fumes while he was doing makeup. But no,
Paint fumes and rubber
but
cement. Yep.
yeah. So when I went to make the mold, I didn't have the materials he was saying to use, but so I was like, oh, I have plaster of Paris. That's plaster. That's the same thing. Spoiler alert, it's not. And
No, no give.
I made I thought I did a good mold, and then when I went to take the mold apart, it just shattered into pieces, and I was heartbroken that I was never going to get to make a mask I wanted. Um, but thanks, by the way, for bringing up my secret pain now with this tragedy I've relived.
It's where
Um,
we ask the hard hitting questions.
that's right. I'm just crying. But it's a I had that I pulled enough experience together where I finally did learn how to make a good rubber monster mask. And so all while I was doing those other jobs, I was teaching myself how to sculpt, which was the next step. Um, and the way I did that was by sculpting the characters from the cantina. Because one, I was obsessed with them, so that it was like easy to focus on, and
Mhm.
two, they're freaking cool. Like
Right.
there's a wide variety of designs. There's stuff that's humanish, like the devil guy. There's stuff that's skull like the Given. There's furry things. There's really wrinkly, monstrous stuff. There's smooth stuff. And it gave me plenty to dig into. And you had the stuff that was done by Stuart Freeborn's team that was really different than the stuff done by Rick Baker's team. And so I just went through and sculpted a whole bunch of those. And and honestly taught myself to sculpt pretty good. So
Okay.
um, eventually that work led to getting some smaller gigs and getting some stuff on the side, and eventually it just got to a point where it was like, okay, this is either going to uh, have to be cut off and always stay on the side, or it's gotten too big where I can do anything else. So, it was a really tough question. I had been at the time in the television industry, was working as a technical director, good pay, solid, steady job, benefits, all of that stuff. Had a wife, had a house. Um, Really, really challenging question of like,
Mm.
can I make this leap? Is this okay? But hitting on doing the restoration work, which grew out of this prop collecting that happened on the side while I was doing all of this. Once you get bitten with the collector gene, it's there.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that became something that was unique, that could you could build a business around, that you could that I'd be offering something more than just rubber monster masks that everybody, lots of people make anyway. And so, yeah, that it made sense to make the leap. That was 2006, so 19 years ago. And I've luckily not had to look back since. So pretty pleased with that.
And that leap was Tom Spina Designs.
Yes. Yeah. And I had the work that we were doing, and there was even kind of a tentative website that had been up since probably about 2004. And I was, doing restoration work for other people, doing some displays, some mannequin stuff. And that really, it just built up so quickly. And the really cool thing is the day I put in my notice, I got a call from an old puppet friend who had gotten a job on a TV show that was filming locally in New York, and he needed a couple of puppet characters sculpted. And I was like, good timing. I could use a gig.
Yeah.
So first gig out of it was a puppet gig, which made me happy.
That's very cool. I love the whole trajectory of you teaching yourself to sculpt, because I wanted to get to that since you were talking about making the puppets and then working for Sesame Street as a puppet wrangler, not exactly making them.
Right.
And then seeing what's on your website now is like, I know it's the same world, but it seems like it's so far apart.
Yeah. Fabrication is fabrication. I say this a lot to the people that I hire that come to work for us. Um, when I look at a portfolio, I'm not looking at the medium. I'm not looking at. Sometimes I'm not even really looking at the quality of work. I just want to see what the artist sees,
Okay.
and because you can teach people techniques.
Mm-hmm.
What you can't teach them is to see something, to see when something looks right or doesn't look right, or when they're, it's a little like people who do vocal impersonations. When I love hearing different people do the same actor, like do the same voice, because each one of them brings a different element. They exaggerate a different part of that person's voice because
Right.
that's the thing they hear or they see in that character. And uh, there's a lot of times where it's like that with work. You see someone's work and you say, oh, look, they found a hook that maybe I never even noticed in that person they were drawing, that character they were sculpting, that creature they were making. And when I see something that surprises me like that, that really is what jumps out at me and is like, okay, this is somebody I want to have here.
That sounds more like one of those like undefinable qualities where someone probably couldn't come up with that in an interview.
It's yeah. Um, it's also, yeah, interviews are tricky for us.
Yeah.
And hiring is always tough. We're looking for people that, uh, you know, we have the two companies going. So sometimes you need people that can do very specific stuff that you're going to have to train them on for years. Other times you need people that can do repeated tasks like producing stuff for Regal Robot, where maybe you're painting the same maquette 100 times, or you're
Mm.
working on casting something and you've got to get the right thing and you get the rhythm going. You got to be fast. You got to be good at it. It's got to be clean, so we're not redoing stuff. Um, and when the good thing is that it's a rare opportunity, that when if you're on Indeed or wherever we might be posting something, um, you're not going to find 1,000 art jobs, and you're definitely not going to find 20 art jobs, and you're probably not going to find 10 of them or 5 of them or even 2 that deal with the stuff we deal with. Pretty quickly, I think the candidates, when they get to know what we're doing, beyond just seeing like, oh, this is a job doing production art or whatever it is, once they go through and click through to our websites and take a look, they're like, oh, this is not like any other place I'm ever going to get to work. Um,
Yeah.
that I think is probably the coolest thing, is that we get to offer these people that chance to do something like that, to find another 19 or 20 people that are doing something creative for a living and now be one of them.
That's probably really good for employee retention too.
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you? No, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, generally speaking, I'm very lucky with the folks we have. We actually have so Rob, who's our creative director over at Regal Robot, is someone that is has been full time with us about 5 years, but had been working with us on a project basis since the very beginning of Tom Spina Designs, and I've known him since the late '90s. Um, and when we moved into the studio we're in now in 2011, I hired Pat and Melissa, and shortly after Christine. And the three of them are still with me, and they know everything. They are indispensable in each in their own way, and I'm very grateful to have folks that have been here that long with me, and the foundation of the place like that. It's very very nice as we've because we've grown immensely over these last years. And there was a time in 2011 where it was like me, Pat, and one other guy named Mike, and like it was just the three of us. And
Wow.
we'd have lunch every day at a little table together. There was like two tables in the middle of a big room and a couple of shelves on the side, and it's just very quickly. And over time, you would just, oh look, there's another shelving unit. Oh, there's two more tables. Oh, there's that. Wait, now we got a photo area. Oh, nope, that's filled. Okay, wait, that space is filled. And then you just look at photos from the studios over the year, and it's just crowded, more crowded, more crowded, more crowded. Then we blew out a wall. We went to the one behind us. That got crowded. We blew out another wall. That got crowded. It's pretty amazing to see the difference.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So you
Thanks.
went from you created you when you went on your own Tom Spina Designs, you were doing work for hire stuff, and also you're talking about restorations. That's like original costuming, original props, actually screen used that people buy
Yes.
at an auction or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Or
And
through someplace like a propstore.com or something like that. Yeah. So folks, that were collectors, which I was lucky to be a movie prop collector at the time. And I say lucky because at the time you could afford to do it. Now it's a much bigger hobby, I guess, and it's
yeah.
reaching a different crowd. Although it's funny, for all the jokes about that, because of the high ticket items, there's still so many items that go in that like $500 to $1,000 range, where you like, if you just really love a show, there's probably something you can get. And there's no better connection for me to a show than something that you can point to and say that was on screen. This was
Mm.
held by one of my favorite actors. This is worn by someone, or this is one of my favorite creatures in the case of a mask or something. And through collecting that stuff, I got to know a ton of people that did the same. It was a very tight knit community. Everybody, you know, we were all networking. We all wanted to find more stuff, and so you'd get to know folks and try, and it's like, oh, do you know anybody that has something from Star Trek 2? Oh, yeah, I'm trying to find this from Star Wars, or I'm trying to find this from some TV show. Um, and or you discuss all the auctions that were coming up and things like that. And back then, it was a much more affordable hobby. But through all those people, I found people that needed things. People were buying old foam latex props and rubber pieces and polyfoam and things like that, and stuff that wasn't made to last. And it turned out, that I was able to fix that stuff. I was able to help them, and I really dug in. I started reading up on conservation and art and things like that. Um, but that never really applied. It was a little like, you know, back in the day, going to the library and trying to find how to, do how to make movie stuff, or
Right.
how to make puppets or things like that. Like you'd find a book from the 1950s showing you how to make a marionette, and I'm like, I'm trying to make Rolf the dog here, like this isn't the same. Um, and so I had to sort of take that conservation information and filter it through the effects guy brain of how the stuff was made, and then apply the sculptor artist side of my brain into how do we apply this stuff in a way that really gets to be invisible, or is really sympathetic and complementary to the material that's there.
Mm.
How do we you know I how do you build your own philosophy of this stuff? Because it's really easy to have the ship of Theseus. It's really easy to overdo a prop restoration, and I had seen some of that, and I've said, okay, I know what I don't want to do. What I and so what is it I want to do? I want to keep this stuff as original as possible. I want to maintain as much of the patina and age and things that make it a real prop, things that make it not the replica. You want something perfect, great, go get a replica mask, get a replica prop. If you want the thing that was used on screen, you need to see the age of it. You need to feel like it's been around. And if you start erasing that, well, you're erasing the history of the piece. So
Right.
finding the right balance was key. And luckily, it turned out to be a philosophy a lot of other folks bought into and got behind. And it became a thing where every time a new prop comes in that we have to fix up, we have a conversation with the owner, and we say, what are your hopes for this? Not even your expectations, because those are different, but what heart of hearts, no limits, what do you hope this looks like at the end? And usually they want to push further than we do. And we go, that's great. Now let's pull that back a little bit and let's find a way to do this that respects the piece 100%. And it's funny. I actually, maybe I'm exaggerating, because I don't. I would say it's probably a minority of people that want to push further than us now, which is nice. It used to kind of be more. There's
The
a
old
lot of
collectors would
people who
want it
get it.
perfect, brand new, and you kind of taught them that.
Yeah. Well, and there is, even with some of the Regal stuff, we sometimes say, like, we're picking unique stuff to build at Regal Robot.
Yeah.
I and it's very much like when I went into business with TSD and pushing the restoration as the sort of hook of the business. I don't like doing things other people are doing. I'd rather carve my own path and compete. And if we have to compete, we'll do it our way, and hopefully, that'll stand out enough. And where we've had to, I feel like we've done okay. But for the most part, we try to pick things that other shops, would never do
Hmm.
or can't do for whatever reason, or it doesn't work at the scale that most larger licensees do, or it's just so weird that that not only would no one ever do it, but the folks at Lucasfilm are going to look at us like we're crazy when we suggest it. And that's when I really feel like we're at our best. When
That's
I
when you
go to
know you hit the right
Lucasfilm
thing.
and they say, and you think people want to buy this? Like, that's when I'm like, yes, absolutely.
What's really special about that is maybe you're not selling as many as if you just churned out the same thing as a lot of other companies, but the people who have it really want it, for one, but also it's more special because there are only X amount out there in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Almost everything we're doing is extremely limited. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, when you're talking about other places doing runs of 500, 1,000, 2,500 pieces. And I know, overall, high end collectibles in particular has gotten a lot smaller in the edition sizes over the last few years. Um, and over the last 10, 15 years, you go back in the mid 2000s and you get a bust from Sideshow, and they were making, over 1,000 on some of those, sometimes even more. Um, but yeah, to offer some stuff as low as 50 pieces or 80 pieces or something like that, that's a kind of unheard of in the license sphere,
Right.
because most licensees are looking to make big money on a few pieces, and to make that up in scale, and to um, to get things out there into retailers' hands and stuff like that. And look, frankly, you're working for Disney now. It's a very big company. That's probably would make our lives easier if that's what we did. Um, but our own authentic self, as it were, uh, we like the weirdos. We want to do the stuff that no one's doing, because here's the thing. You want to go into your collection room, you want to go into your office, you want to go into your living room, wherever you're putting this stuff, and you want to look and see something that not a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And that maybe that comes from that screen use prop side. where it's like you go in and maybe you've got something that's one of one. Maybe there were 5 of these made for the movie and you've got one of them. You're going, there's 5 of these in the whole world and I have one. Like, that's crazy. That's like a
Right.
Bond villain sort of a thing, like, and over there's a Mona Lisa, but in, with our stuff, you can go like, there were only 83 of those and I got one. And, now everybody is going, people are asking about it years later, like or the 50-piece run we did of our first Chewbacca bust, or the Rancor that we did that was 83 pieces a few years ago. There are people that are always hunting for those. And the answer is just like, good luck. They never come up, because it's like nobody wants to part with it. And if they do, they want a ridiculous amount of money. But
Right.
it does. Yeah, it makes those things special. It makes all the people who bought it part of a club, and when you're doing like deep cut stuff, look, we always used to say in high school, it was the Boba Fett nod, So when Bush comes in and she's got the thermal detonator and she pulls off the little, the threat to Jabba and he laughs about it. And, afterwards, Fett just kind of does the like,
yep.
that Fett nod. We used to do that all the time when somebody would like quote one of the making of documentaries back and forth. It's like, okay, there's people out there quoting the movies. Then you got people out there who are like quoting the movies and they're saying Greedo's lines. Okay, that's one level of it. But then you have people out there, quoting like the from Star Wars The Jedi, the making of a saga back and forth, or doing the sound effects from when they were doing the animatics for the speeder bikes. Like we would do that all the time in high school and college, and me and my buddies would just like Fett nod, like, that's
Yep.
what it was.
Your own
And
little
that's
small
our
club.
people, you know. So yeah, everybody who buys Regal Robot stuff, like next time you run into another guy in a Regal t-shirt, you got to give him the nod.
Right. Okay. It is cool. It's something for collectors to kind of seek. If you can go to the store, buy 10 of something,
Right.
it could be very cool, and I will do that. But
Yeah.
it's a lot different if there's one that you have your eye on, and oh, when I get money from this, or when I pull that off, or when it's this celebration, you can get that extra special thing.
Yeah. Or if we have we do a lot of signature editions with people who worked on the movies. We do a lot of, we've even been doing these sketch editions where we have people like Phil Tippett and Dave Carson and Chris Wayless and Tom Sanamon and others doing, sketches of the characters they designed to go with these editions. Nilo Rodas just did one with us too, which was amazing to have him on it. And I mean, there again, you're talking stuff that's super small editions, really special, a one-of-a-kind drawing. You know what I mean?
From the creator.
By their hand, even if they drew a few of them similar, there's none exactly alike because it's hand drawn, pencil on paper, sometimes watercolors. Like that is special, and it's really, really been cool seeing those things start to go home, and then. We've been doing this run of the maquettes from Return of the Jedi. And a lot of people think of a maquette and they just think, and this is actually, I think, where we started this conversation about educating people. A lot of people just think, oh, they see maquette, they think Gentle Giant, or they think of like these companies that make a small statue, because sometimes in licensing they've called it that. But what we're doing are replicas of the original concept sculptures that were made to design the creatures for Empire, for Return of the Jedi. There were even a couple in A New Hope, although there's some stories behind those. But it's we are constantly having to kind of, teach people about those. And the cool way we've been doing is I've done video chats with a lot of the folks that made them. And their stories are so good. I mean, just, the chance for me to get on a video chat with any of these people for an hour is just like dream of dreams, right?
Right. Yeah. Because you're a fan first.
Oh, yeah. And then, but, to have my own history in the business and to be able to talk shop with them, I feel like we get places that these people would never get in a typical kind of podcast scenario. And I really try and dig deep. I really try and pick their brains about the creative process and where this stuff comes from and how the mechanisms of how they did stuff. And and so yeah, if anybody goes to either the at Tom Spina Designs or at Regal Robot YouTube pages, you can find these interviews. They're they're fun in spite of me, but it's just amazing to hear these people talk.
Yeah. It's so cool that you grew up a fan and now you have access, and not only do you have access to people who you're a fan of, but you're a peer.
It's insane. Yeah, we yeah, a constant stream of like, nerdvana kind of moments where you're just going like, is this real life? Did this just happen? Did we, we'll when we're in different areas where some of these folks are, we'll get together, we'll have dinner, we'll see them, we'll hang out. And there's just times where you go and you look around the room. I remember once sitting in a room and I'm going, there's Phil Tippett and there's John Berg and there's Dennis Murin and there's me. Why?
Yeah.
Like, why? Yeah, just kind of waiting for one of them to look over and realize, hey, kid, get out of here.
Yeah,
Like,
what are you doing here?
yeah. And to be fair, like Rob was there and Barry and stuff like that too. But it's like, but I'm the one sitting here having like crazy just imposter syndrome while you're among these folks. But like even at that point, like some of them I'd known for 10 or more years at that point, and I just feel they've been really, really welcoming. And I feel like one of my big goals with Regal Robot is to celebrate the making of the movies and to celebrate the people responsible for these characters. There's a ton of stuff that happens in licensing that is about the character. There's a ton of backstory to the character that comes out. There's, oh, this is this character, but young, even though you never saw him that way in the movie, or this is some new interpretation of a character because he's how he was in a cartoon, or this or that or the other thing. It's all great, and I enjoy that stuff. But it's a very typical path in licensing, and it's for a much more mass audience than we hit anyway, so it's fine. They can have it. But our path has always been, it's for me, the I watched the making of the movies more times than I watched the movies, and I love the movies, and I watch the movies a lot.
Yeah.
But I would wear tapes out that had these documentaries on them. Watching the stop motion stuff being done for Empire on what was it, SPFX, the Making of Empire Strikes Back documentary. Holy crap. Like I immediately got my dad's Super 8 camera and my Tauntaun Kenner action figure. I jammed his tail into a shoebox so that he wouldn't fall over while I moved his legs. And I set the camera up, and I didn't have a frame thing, so I just touched the button real quick.
Yeah.
And it turned out I was doing like half-second animation. Not recommended. Very
very choppy. Yeah.
But but I was doing it, and and of course I'm like 10, at this time, or not even, I guess. What would I have been? I was probably like 8 or 9, but just why was I doing it? Because I saw it on the documentary and I thought, hey, I can do that. I also saw them blowing things up on that documentary, and I don't want to go into where that led. Kids, don't try that at home. But yeah, it was, it's, to me, those people are the stars. And to be able to shine a spotlight on them, to be able to connect a lot of the work to them. There was a lot of this stuff nobody even knew. When we would start to go to the archives and look through these maquettes, first off, there was a bunch no one knew about because you barely ever saw them. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, nobody knew who made any of them. And so we went through this process of going through with all of the people who worked on this, and asking them. And, I would just bother Kirk Thatcher nonstop. Like, hey, Kirk, I found this other maquette. What do you think? Who's that? And sometimes he'd remember, sometimes he wouldn't. He'd ask Ken Ralston. All right, I'll go to Ken. It's like, I'm not sure. I think it's Tom Santamon's. Okay, Tom, what do you think? Yeah, that's mine. Yeah, boom, one down. We did that like 90 times. And we're down to only like 2 or 3 of them, I think, that are at the archives that we don't know who made them.
Wow.
And that's out of like 90 pieces. And then there's a handful of other ones that we've discovered in old photos that are just missing that we don't know much about. Those are like white whales for me. I love stuff like that.
Those might have to be ones you recreate because they might have gotten repurposed in other projects. And
You never know. Or, someone thought it was cool and just brought it home.
right, it's in a garage somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. But it's, to have the chance to ID these people, to identify their work and to put it out there. And so that, we've got this, if I can hype our Facebook group. We have the Regal Robot Fan and Collector Showcase on Facebook. If you just search Regal Robot Group on Facebook, you'll find it. Click the join button. Make sure you answer the question that you'll follow all the admin's rules and be a good little boy or girl, and we'll let you in. And it's a super fun group of people, and they're all equally obsessed with this stuff. There's almost 5,000 members now, and it's only been around like a year or two.
Wow.
And it's so much fun. There's so many people who are like, ugh, Facebook. And I'm like, hey, Facebook, only because of that group. The rest of it, but the group is great. Please go there.
Just bookmark that and stick to it.
Yes, please. Yeah. Just go right into the group, and that's it. Don't go anywhere else. Trust me.
The thing you're talking about with like having imposter syndrome, with talking to all these people who did the creating, the ILM people, all these like amazing creators who are the backbone of the movie, like almost the unsung heroes in a way. Yeah. Did you kind of have that same feeling the first time you got to work on an actual screen used prop?
That was a different feeling. I think the closest you could describe that to would be like operating on someone else's child. Where it's not so much imposter syndrome, but just an intense sense of responsibility,
pressure,
and caution and pressure. The most I ever felt on that, and I'll say yet, because
right,
who knows?
Every day.
But the most I ever felt was my good friends Bob and Kathy Burns. Kathy has since passed away. Bob is a movie prop collector and historian. Super famous in the collecting community. He has a book called It Came From Bob's Basement that's amazing for anybody who likes, just the hobby of collecting things. It's totally worth getting. It's a lot of fun. And he turns 90 in a couple of days, actually. But he was someone who was a mentor to Rick Baker and who, and a ton of other effects guys. And he used to do these Halloween shows at his house in the 70s and ultimately beyond. And he would have like a very young Rick Baker work on his Halloween show at his house. And like people would come from miles around and line up in front of his house to come see this Halloween show. And it would either be like something where they'd set it up in the front room of the house where people would open the door, come into one room. Somebody would turn from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde right before your eyes and stuff like that. And, there'd be a blackout scare and you'd leave. And then eventually it became this massive thing with sets and special effects, and Dennis Muren was involved. I mean, it's crazy, the people he's had work on these things. And because he knew all these people, they all gave him stuff. And he had the original wolf from American Werewolf in London.
Oh, wow.
One of my absolute favorite movies, by probably hero of heroes when it comes to sculpting and makeup effects, Rick Baker. And I didn't know Rick at the time, but I had known Bob for years. And at one point he gave me a call and he's just like, help. I was like, what's wrong, Bob? He has this great old avuncular guy. And he just, it's like, it's Oscar. His face is on the floor. And I'm like, who's Oscar? It's call the police, Bob, but Oscar was what he called the wolf because Rick Baker won an Oscar for American Werewolf in London, the first makeup Oscar. And it was just funny how much he shifted gears. Like, Oscar's face is on the floor. Who's Oscar? Oh, that's what I call the werewolf. It was like this great shift. And then he shifts back to help. And so I flew out and I'm going to work on this wolf for a week in Bob's basement. And that was as nervous as I think I ever was to work on something, because I'm like, this is where I could either, you know, save a piece of history or make Rick Baker hate me forever.
Right.
And he is, look, he is someone with a very, very high level of expectation of work. You know, like you hear stories from people who worked in his shops. He does not put up with subpar work. And you see the stuff that comes out of his shop and you're like, oh, yeah, no, he definitely doesn't, because it's all amazing. Background stuff that came out of his shop. There were background apes from that 2001 ape movie that would have been hero close up masks in any other movie. And in that movie, it's like, oh, no, that can be like 500 feet from camera.
On screen for half a second. Yeah.
Exactly. But he wasn't going to risk it. So I go and I'm fixing it up, and um, Bob is there and he's telling me, like Rick said it couldn't be fixed, and I said, I got a friend, he's going to come fix it. I'm like, and I'm just putting it up because Bob tells a lot of stories and he's a really funny guy, and I'm just like, oh, this is Bob's stories, whatever. And and I'm working and I'm working, and then every, I don't know, a couple of hours, Bob just come up behind me. It's like, oh, it's looking so good. We'll show that, Rick Baker. And I'm like, oh God, like,
please leave my name out of that.
you know, oh, and that was so right there. Every time he would say that, it was like the lump in your throat, and just like that was absolutely the most pressure I ever felt working on something. And ultimately, luckily, it did turn out well, and it was how I eventually got to meet Rick. And he sent me an email, and he actually in the email said, "It's like, I told Bob it was too far gone. I told him to throw it away.
Wow.
Thanks for doing the impossible." I was like, like,
even if it couldn't be fixed, I couldn't imagine throwing something like that away.
Right. Even if you just strip it down to the mechanics, it's still a wonderful demonstration
Yeah.
of vintage technology and like movie history. Like you don't throw that away. I
No
don't. I
way.
mean, maybe he was telling stories then, but
Or he's made so many, he's like, whatever.
yeah. But there you go. It's like you're working on someone else's child. It's
Yeah,
like, well,
yeah.
if this goes wrong, they're not going to be thrilled with me.
So with something like that, what is the line that you were talking about earlier with you want to restore it to preserve it, but you don't want to redo it and it's all brand new?
Yeah.
Was it just make it serviceable? Was it to try to hide the repair?
So yeah, I mean, generally, you obviously you don't want a repair that shows.
Hmm.
Um, but he had some cracks up in his brow and stuff like that that I addressed and stabilized, but didn't blend over.
Okay.
Especially stuff that was in the hair, because it's like, okay, I could cut the hair off, I could totally patch this, I could glue back the hair, but this had been punched hair. And I'll do one of these. I'm really good at laying hair, and I can do that thing where you're gluing in a few strands at a time, or even one strand at a time, and making it look punched in that kind of situation. But why? It's like it can have a couple of cracks, but let's just do something so they don't get worse. Let's bind them together. Let's get them glued to the understructure. Let's make sure that the foam is preserved as best we can in those areas. The big thing was his face wasn't on the floor, but it was in pieces. It was a little rough. Um, uh, so let's get the jaw locked in place so that the foam can't get broken again. Let's get the pieces that were there into place. And so many times with this stuff, a puzzle that's undone looks terrifying, right? Like a puzzle with maybe 20 pieces in out of 500, and it just looks like this big empty space. I have no idea. But
Yeah.
as soon as you start putting pieces in, it comes together. And that's the way it is with this stuff. You're like, it's almost like when you're sculpting, you're pushing around the clay, and you're pushing, something up a hill, and there's always this point where you get to a peak, and once you get past that, the thing you're sculpting starts looking back at you. You're like, there it is, I can see him now.
Okay.
It's like,
Yeah.
and then it's downhill from there, except sometimes then there's another hill that you don't know about at the end.
Right.
Like, oh, come on, I lost it. But with the restoration, it's like, yeah, once you start putting the pieces in, it's like, okay, I see where this is going. There's only a little bit that's missing, I can fix that. And there was one of the things that was interesting is on the face, he was missing um, one or two little pieces in the cheeks. I managed to patch that over, and to fill the missing hair, I stole a few hairs out of like the kind of crotch area, because it's way in the back and it was between sort of the fold of the leg and the flank, and it was like, okay, I can take a little out of here, one hair at a time from a few different places, you'd never see it, and then just so to maintain that original fur and everything on him,
Right.
even if some
Yeah.
was missing. So yeah, all in all, a nerve wracking but fun and ultimately successful, thankfully, job.
And also, you got to meet Rick Baker.
Insane. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it's I yeah. Very, very much one of the luckiest, monster kids around. I think myself. That is,
Right, right.
um,
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
amazing.
yeah. It's I just super fortunate for sure.
I feel like we're barely scratching the surface, but I don't want to keep you here till like 4 o'clock in the morning. So you want to get into a little bit more of like Regal Robot. It's May
Sure.
the 4th as we're recording this.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah. What do you know? Every day is like May the 4th for us.
yeah, I know.
It really is.
What's the difference?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for us, it's Regal started because we had started doing some home theming and stuff for people at Tom Spina Designs, and I thought it was an area that no one was really hitting on in terms of licensed stuff and in terms of Star Wars. And it was anytime we did something like that, it made a big splash. We would do cantina monsters and stuff like that, or do a commercial or whatever, and it would do great for us. But if you did, we made a Han Carbonite desk years and years ago. It was a one-off. It was something somebody was going to auction off for charity, and it wound up, you know, at a time before there was social media, going super viral, before viral was even viral, it's like 2007, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, and, all of the blogs picked it up. uh, and we got flooded with people asking about it. I was like, oh, it's a one of a kind. We don't have a license. We don't want to do anything to step on Lucas's toes. It was just sort of just for fun and charity. But it was like, oh, you know what? I mean, maybe this is something. Maybe this is one of those other places where we found something no one's doing. And that was what the original pitch for Regal was, to do furniture and decor, but in a propish artistic kind of way, and to give it that deep cut sensibility that we have on top of it all. And it got, basically a lot of doors slamming in our face. um, it took a very, very long time to find the right person. Originally, it was Lucasfilm. Then they got bought out. Then it became Disney, and it was a long time before we found someone at Disney who kind of just got it.
Yeah.
And she looked at it and she was like, it's like, oh, I want that for my living room. Like, that's cool. Like, we'd show her a deck with ideas and stuff. And, speaking of scratching the surface, like those decks, we'd put together, we'd have a brainstorm session, me and some of the folks that were, kind of guys at the shop, and some other friends that were folks that would freelance for us and things. And so we'd get together and we'd do a weekend, and we would just sketch and doodle and write down ideas, and just, I mean, like, pages and pages, stacks of paper of sketches of ideas for funky desks and wall shelving and bookcases and chairs and side tables and end tables and credenzas and you name it, as if they were all part of the Star Wars universe, or things from the Star Wars universe reinterpreted, turned upside down, twisted inside out. And like the every once in a while we'll have somebody in licensing who says, like, we're doing some of these characters, and they're like, yeah, it's an edition of 100 pieces. You're gonna run out of things to do, though. You better make these editions count. You should maybe make this 500 pieces. And we're just like, no, don't worry. Like,
Yeah. You're not
you're
running out of
never
things to
running out.
do.
Okay. You've got 3 original trilogy movies, you got 3 prequels, you got a holiday special, which I have barely even touched yet. You've got Ewok movies, the sequels, You got sub prequels in the sequels. You got the in between wolves that are happening and TV show. Like we are not running out. Like we're good.
Not to mention countless concept art books like the maquettes you're doing that didn't even make it
They're
to the
not even
screen.
in the movie. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's like, so here's the funniest thing. We have done two Bib Fortuna collectibles. One of them was a one of a kind that someone commissioned us, a very high ticket one off sculpture of one of Ralph McQuarrie's sketches of Bib Fortuna,
Wow.
where he looks nothing like the final character. He's got like kind of a bug eye and a droopy, kind of craggy, wrinkly face, and a huge hat and a collar. It looks like a vizier or something. And he's all this orange hat and this pasty peachy skin and uh but it was a concept art piece that just this one guy loved ever since he was a kid. It was his background on his computer, and he just always thought it was cool. And then he saw us and he said, oh, these guys get it. Like, that's who I can ask to do this.
Right.
And when he came up to me, he's like, can you make Bib Fortuna? And I was kind of like, because the final Bib Fortuna with the tentacles and all of that, I'm like, that's a really tough piece to mold, but all right, we could do it. And then he's like, no, the concept. I'm like, go on, so we did that, and then we did Phil's concept maquette where he's pink with blue stripes and a red shirt on and stuff like that, and he looks all pulled and drawn and very much like the version of was a Beezer Fortuna that turns up in Rogue One, which the
Mhm.
makeup is really based on Phil's concept, which is awesome. But
Yeah, I
like,
love how much of the concept of is creeping its way into shows and cartoons and things now.
oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of like Ralph McQuarrie sketches that made
Yeah,
their way into
yeah.
the cartoons and things. Even that Bib Fortuna character turns up in Rebels, I think. That creature look
Mhm.
basically turns up as one of the characters in Rebels, a background character or something. But like, oh, love it. But yeah, so it's like two times we've done a named character, and both times it's not the one seen on film.
Yeah. Name
So
character that you will not recognize.
right.
That's so cool. What was your? I think you were working on something for May the 4th, or you just get exceptionally busy.
So yeah, well, that's for sure. Usually for May the 4th, a lot of times we'll do a sale. This year we didn't. We don't really have a ton of stock on hand to blow stuff out, but we did have a new release. It came out this morning. It sold really well so far. I'm very excited that a lot of people want to bring these home. So we do a series of magnets. But they're not like your typical, full color character kind of thing or a two-dimensional cutesy thing with a saying. They're very propish, or they're very artistic. Like there's a lot of bronze and silver looks and stuff. And the ones we did this time are based on the props that they used to make the Death Star trench. So if you ever see the behind the scenes stuff where they're in the parking lot of ILM blowing up things, there's that word again, blowing things up in the parking lot of ILM, and they have this wall full of these cool deco tech kind of panels. That's the way they made those. Was they made molds for a bunch of different designs, and then they just cast multiples of them, and they would put them up in different orders, and they would cut them and break them into pieces and stuff. And so it just was this mass of cool surface that looked high tech, but also looked great in a flyby. And so the whole trench is covered in these tiles. The whole surface is covered in these tiles. Anytime a ship blows up on the surface of the Death Star, it's into those tiles. And so, and one of those was the first screen use prop I ever got,
Oh,
was
that's
a
cool.
section of
That's
the
a
Death
cool
Star.
one.
And so it kind of came all the way around. So it was what we decided to do was like, let's make those as these magnets, and they're 19.99 each, so you can buy a bunch. They look great, at the base of a display for a toy ship or a model or something like that, or in the background of a bunch of ships. Like I could see somebody doing a bunch of these as a little wall, and then having like a TIE fighter chasing an X-wing or something in front of them.
Make your own
Um,
trench. Yeah.
yeah, and and yeah, they came out today. There's 5 different designs. They're loosely based on what's called the mid-altitude style prop, which is made up of 3x3 squares. Ours are 2.6-inch squares, so that they're not too bulky as a magnet. But they're really cool. They're good. I always love stealth geek, stuff that you
Hmm.
could bring into your life and put out in places, and people just think like, oh, that's a cool piece of art. Like, oh, that's a neat thing. What is that? And they don't have to know that it's secret nerd stuff.
Right.
It's like, because so
Perfect.
much of our life is spent with not secret nerd stuff. It's nice to be able to bring the nerd stuff into like the wherever the nerd stuff isn't allowed. Like, this is how you get it in there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Get more of it around the house.
Yeah, there you go. No, honey, that's always been there.
Right. It's just a cool design. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's like, you're not famous. You're not familiar with the famous artist Denise Miren. You know, like, ooh, oh, okay, no French, okay.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really clever take on something familiar, but at the same time, no one else has done it. So
Yeah,
it's
and yeah, and it's like because it's a magnet, it's got some usefulness to it, but it's also very propish and could be incorporated into all sorts of displays. And it's funny. We've been just lately we've managed to put out a few things that were in our first deck to Lucasfilm when we were like really early pitches. These as magnets were really, really early in our ideas. The other one was the Millennium Falcon cockpit chair, Han Solo's pilot seat and Chewie's seat.
mhm,
Um, we made a desk chair out of that, and that just came out a few months ago, and that's available on the site now. You can
that's very
anybody
cool
for all this stuff we're talking about, just go to regalrobot.com and tool around. You'll find all the cool
for
stuff.
sure. Yeah.
Um, but that was another one that was in an early deck. We just did maquettes for. We did the one for Yuzum. We did a while back. We did Max Rebo and Droopy McCool. We did the. It's still available. Is the Wampa puppet. Phil Tippett, for the close-ups of the Wampa in Empire Strikes Back, it's actually a 15-inch wide, 12-inch tall puppet that Phil Tippett made in like a day because the full-size costume just wasn't working on site in Finse, Norway. So they just did a couple of close-ups in the ILM parking lot and aimed it at the sky so you couldn't see the green hills, and there you go. Like there's your Wampa that ends up in the movie. And uh that was another one I always loved. Our One of our first trips to the archives for Regal, we had been going for years before that because we had been just invited as friends, which was really nice, and got to
That's
just go
cool.
and
Yeah.
hang out a few times. But then we also got to do a bunch of restoration work for them, and that was dream work. But this was our first trip as like Regal Robot for research, and some of the first stuff we had them pull were the Yuzum maquette, the Wampa puppet, the Gaffy stick, the Max Rebo, and the Droopy McCool maquette. And the Max Rebo was the maquette as well. And we have since done all of those. And it makes me so happy, to think like, oh man, that first stuff we were looking at. Another really early one, I think it was the next trip, was the Tusken Raider. And we've got the Tusken Raider 1-to-1, mask and bust now. That is, that's one of those ones. It's funny. The Wampa puppet does this to me too. When you're a replica maker, you usually walk into a room that has some of your work in it and immediately see the flaws and immediately recognize it as the replica.
Hmm.
And the Tusken Raider in particular, the Wampa puppet does this, but the Tusken Raider really does this. When I walk into a room and they have 2 or 3 of those Raiders going in the back, and I just see them on a shelf, I immediately flash to seeing the 2 of them on the shelf at the archives. Which I've stared at these things for hours and hours. If you add up all the time, not to mention, even when we were not researching, I could never walk by them without just going like, "Oh my god, they're so cool." Ours just feels right, and like that to me is like when you've got it. It's like
Right.
when it makes you flash back to seeing that. And so much of it is just in the weathering and the application of the fabric, the fact that we had custom fabric made just for it, and the color is so good. It's like there's it's the size of it is another thing too. They're so much bigger than people expect, those heads. But yeah, every time I walk in the studio and we have something like that, the Tauntaun busts do this a little bit too. But man, those Raiders, yeah, every time it gets me.
They
Sorry,
look
I just
photo real.
completely
No,
went off
it's
on. We
amazing.
are going to go till 4 a.m.
No, because I was looking. I mean, I looked through your site pretty regularly before we were even talking. The one that put you guys on the map for me was the Palpatine throne desk chair.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, I need that in my office. I work from home. I'm going to be in this thing 10 hours a day. I need that chair.
It's pretty comfy too. Yeah.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah. I gotta say I do think though that the Falcon chair is comfier. I don't know. It's the shape of it. It kind of hugs your back a little bit because it's got the little sort of outcrops on the side. And
Okay,
it's just, man, that's a
like
comfy
a
chair.
proper cockpit chair.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. You feel like you just need to strap in and like, okay, let's do this meeting.
I just think, how much cooler would this conversation be if I was in Palpatine's throne?
Right. Yeah. So be it,
I'm
Spina.
kind of surprised you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I sometimes get to do these from my collection room, which is nicer, but the Wi-Fi isn't great there. And
Uh,
this was a new link to it was not a service I've used before, so I was like, I don't want to risk this on my phone. Let me do this in the office. Which is funny. The wall you see is unfortunately the one, like, the cat covered couch, and a pair of blank windows. The other side is actually, I've got a bunch of Indiana Jones-ish props on one side. I've got some African masks and things, and old photos. It's a kind of themed room. It's half guitar stuff and half like Teddy Roosevelt meets Indiana Jones office kind of thing. I like to be in spaces that have some inspiration, even if it's not just strictly collectibles.
for sure, yeah.
And I'm a big fan of, obviously, theme parks and stuff like that. Haunted Mansion, Tower of Terror, that sort of thing just gets me. And every time I go into a place like that, or the old, oh gosh, the Adventurers Club down in Pleasure Island, when that was still open in Orlando, that was just so inspiring to go into and just so fun. So little taste of that for myself, although no one ever gets to see it. I need to, yeah, I just have to come up with a camera that faces the other way.
Yeah, you need like a multicam setup in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just here we go. We'll just shoot me from the back,
Right.
and it will be good.
You said you did do some work for Galaxy's Edge. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. We have some stuff in Doc Ondar's,
That
shop.
makes sense. There's a
Yeah,
lot of stuff in
exactly.
there.
There's if when you get past about the 8 foot mark, pardon me, I'm smashing my mic. When you get past about the 8 foot mark, that's when you start getting into the things that are decorative purely and not, for sale.
Yeah.
We bid on a bunch of the jobs, but we were late to the mix on it, unfortunately. But we got to do. There's a couple of gaffy sticks in there that were based on ours. We sent them pieces to do reproductions in a different material. There's one of our mythosaur skulls is up on the wall, which is awesome. Which is, you can get one of those, still at Regal Robot, the mythosaur 17.5-inch wall decor. It's bone looking and awesome.
Very cool.
We did Cantina band instruments and some Jabba's Palace instruments and stuff like that. A couple of little things in the queue of the Rise of the Resistance ride, some medical devices and stuff. And in the Oga's Cantina, all of the IG-88 heads and canisters behind the bar we were subcontracted through another company that was doing those, but those were all done through us, which was those are really cool because they're based on old, airplane engine parts, and
Oh, that's cool.
I love incorporating that stuff. And so one of them was the original part. The other was a 3D model because they wanted to change the look of it slightly. So we based it on dimensions of the real thing. And then Gordon Tarpley was doing this. He modified the file to look the way they wanted. And it hurt us a little bit. We're like, oh, but no, it does curve this way. And like, no, it'd be nicer if it was even. Is it though?
It's like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah, well, we'll do it. Paycheck's a paycheck.
Yeah, and you're still making Star Wars.
Exactly. No, and to be able to, like, I'm the last time we were in the parks, there was an after hours event, and we got to go into Oga's because it's usually so crowded we can never even get in there,
Yeah,
and hang out for a little bit. And it's just like to look and see, each of the two cantinas has like, I don't know, 18 of these things in there or something like that. And just to be, just kind of like do one of these along the bar. I'm like, yep, that's because of us. That's pretty
that's
cool.
so
Like
cool.
we helped, there's, but it's like, it's also, here's us helping. Here's everybody else and all the stuff that happened. And then it's still going, like, but we
Yeah.
helped, we did a little.
I mean, if they called and said, like, we need someone to paint the interior of the bathroom, I'd be like, I'm in. I did something
Oh
in
yeah.
Galaxy's Edge. I'm doing
Oh,
it.
you know what actually is another cool thing, and I always forget this until I'm on the ride. There's security footage in Rise of the Resistance when you're waiting for Rey to talk to you with BB-8, and if you look at the security monitors, there's aliens walking around. There's like a Greedo alien and a Duros. Those are ours. We rented the costumes to them, and I think Gordon Tarpley might even be one of them now that I'm thinking about it. And they shot footage of them walking around the ride before it opened to put into the security monitors.
Oh, that's so
So it
cool.
looked like there's activity going on. And I genuinely forget that was something we did. And it's like, I don't know why it blocked that, but I go on the ride and I'm like, hey, that's a good looking Greedo. I wonder who, oh, right. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I'll be there in 2 weeks, so I'll look out for all that
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Have fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we went a couple years ago. It's like if you're a Star Wars fan, whatever era of Star Wars, you got to check it out at least one time.
Oh yeah. Are you? I do a podcast from time to time. It's called Full of Sith. If it's okay to mention another podcast on your show, sorry.
No, great.
But and Holly Fry is on there, and Brian Young, and Holly and I accidentally meet in Disney World on a regular basis, and it's ridiculous. And like I remember at one point, it was like we had met, and it was before Star Wars Land opened, and like her husband was like trying to look over the fence into Star Wars Land, like, what's going on? Sir, you're gonna need to come down, sir. And but we will have, like, if one of us has gone, we'll come back and we'll have like a brain dump on the podcast. But we usually just end up talking about the Ronto wraps and just how delicious they are. Yeah. So
the
that's
food
my
at that
tip
food
for
court was
anyone going.
shockingly good.
It's so good. Like she was like, her thing was like, you need to go with like the vest, like the guy from Blues Traveler used to wear, like a photographer vest with all the pockets, and just load them up with Ronto wraps, and just like you're getting on the plane going through the metal detector, the imaging thing, and they're like, huh? It's like,
no metal,
I
just
need
meat.
these. I might get hungry on the plane.
Yeah, because being at a theme park, I didn't think the food would be so good, but it was.
Yeah, it really, really is. Yeah.
The screen accurate costumes you had that they rented out for Rise of the Resistance, is that just something you made as a for hire, just for fun, and just kind of sits in your warehouse?
Yeah, it all grew out of work we had done. Pardon me. Originally, I guess this is 2011. 2012, it was a Super Bowl commercial for Volkswagen where they were recreating the cantina, and they needed a bunch of aliens, and because that stuff is all either too old and too fragile, or just not in the archives because it went home with the people who made it, they wound up coming to us to make a bunch of this stuff. And so that was kind of the first of many of these commercials and videos we did. We wound up doing stuff for some toy companies. We wound up doing a video with Patton Oswalt and Billy D. Williams for Nerdist, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it was the sort of thing where we just sort of built a stable of really accurate masks and pretty good costumes. Look good on camera costumes was usually what they were, mostly because of the budget on these things. And it's like, okay, well, let's put the money in the mask, because that's the thing that if that falls down, then you really look bad.
Right.
But let's make the head look good. And then, the costume can be the costume. It's going to be in a dark bar. There'll be smoke. It'll be fine. And nobody on College Humor is going, wait a minute, that band guy's costume only has 2 buttons, it should be 3 buttons, you know?
Right.
Um, the really funny thing is, when you go back and look at some of the Cantina shoot, you look at the Cantina band, and everybody in their head is like, oh yeah, they've got these very specific jackets and the gray pants, and then they've got the the not military boots, but like motorcycle boots on. And it's like, they don't have motorcycle boots. They're wearing like sneakers and like whatever shoes they had, like clogs and whatever shoes they were wearing. It's like, 3 different women with women's shoes on, and like Phil Tippett with some brown sneakers, and John Berg with knockoff Adidas, not even like real Adidas, like 2 stripes, like, I mean, and it's just, I love stuff like that. So it's like that, I try not to sweat the costumes, because I'm like, okay, if they got away with it, so can we.
Plus, it's like the whole appeal of Star Wars design is that lived in used universe. So to take everyday things and
Yep.
bleach it or manipulate it or age it or dunk it in tea, it's like that's the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah. And just in how you layer it, you get that like John Molo sensibility where you just Molo, whatever, where you just kind of go like, oh, okay, first movie Star Wars, cantina farmer guy, like, because we would do these and we would need human characters in the background sometimes too. And it's like, okay, uh, tan safari vest, light color undershirt with a slit collar, no buttons showing, plain looking pants tucked into boots, and then a belt on the outside of the vest with a big square metal buckle that's heavily distressed. And it's like, and you're there,
Right.
give the guy a military cap with goggles on top, and that's it. Like, boom, he's in the background in the cantina, and you would never question it.
Yep.
And so we would do these shoots, and we did one that was like 3 shoots in one. It was a Lucasfilm sponsored event, and it was, one of them was College Humor, and the other 2, one was Apprentice A, and Board Shorts, I think, was the third one. They were really fun. They were really funny. It was a week long, and they each had about 2 days to shoot. And they had guest stars coming in, like Weird Al was there, and Lisa Loeb, and Chris Daughtry, and oh god, Rick Springfield was there. Like, I mean, this was just amazing. But what we did for the costumes on that, because we didn't know what we were going to get, we just got pieces. And we like, okay, here's Star Wars belts, here's Star Wars goggles, here's Star Wars looking hats, here's scarves, here's vests, here's shirts. And it was a lot of thrift finds and stuff like that. And we found a couple of like, I went to a thrift store that had a lot of Indian stuff, and found some great tunic shirts that didn't have buttons, that had, little markings on them that looked super Tatooine. And it was stuff like that. And it's funny. I mean, yeah, we were putting like Lisa Loeb in one of our tunics, and putting the belt on it and stuff, and it's just like, okay, there we go, that was the thing. It was all mix and match, and a lot of like, we put a lot of gloves and things too, so we'd put like one mask on one outfit for one series of shots, and then we put the same mask on a different outfit and put them in a different corner for another shot, and it's like, okay, there's 2 of that alien now,
Right. Looks totally different.
which is exactly what they did in the movie,
Yeah.
so why wouldn't we? But yeah, I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so cool that we put especially the original one with how much creativity, like we all put on a pedestal, and rightfully so. It's amazing. But
Yeah.
when you break down how it was made, it was just a bunch of people kind of being like, they were almost like winging it. Like,
Oh
obviously,
yeah.
master craftsmen, I'm not taking anything away from them, but
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
just like, we don't have time,
respect
we don't
that
have money.
more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, if you plan this out and pull it off, good for you. If you wing it and pull this off, hey, all right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And the fact that it still holds up, and we're going into 50 years later,
It's yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, what did they start? They start shooting in '76, so next
Mhm.
year, to me, is the real 50th anniversary.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know?
Because that's when it actually happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And to see that, some of these guys and what they did later, that this was just the start of it, that they were inventing it. The motion control
Yeah.
camera didn't exist. Like,
Yeah.
what? Some of the, like, I still, and it's funny. It's, I will constantly say to these people, I know how you did this, but how did you do this? You talk to Ken Ralston, who had to basically figure out the compositing layers for the Return of the Jedi space battles.
Hmm.
There's 50 elements in some of those shots, and you're
Yeah.
doing this pretty blind in some cases. You know, you're not seeing the stuff until after it's printed, and he's, you know, I Ken's hilarious for starters. Very sarcastic, and it's like, you know, I ask him this, and he says, "Well, it's because we're geniuses." It's like, but then he goes like, "No, we just like, you know, we took paper and we ran the film through a telescene, which is like an edit bay." And projected it on a little screen this big. And with paper, they would trace out where the ships were. And then they would, like, I guess, hold that up and try and line up the next shot so they wouldn't get in the way of the other. Like, it's crazy to think about what they had to go through to do this. And then you're
Yeah.
going, you did that 50 times for one half-second shot?
Right.
You know?
And you made an entire battle out of it.
Yeah. And it's, if you watch that Return of the Jedi battle
Hmm.
and really think how they had to shoot it, where every single ship was shot individually and the ship didn't move, the camera moved. So
Hmm.
that if a ship had to go left, the camera had to bank right to make it look like the ship was banking left. Like,
And
it's
then they had to run the camera in the exact same track, like you said, 5, 6, 7 times to get
right.
every layer on
With a
it.
different, yeah, with a different ship in a different place, or maybe they have a lighting pass going, and they have to do block out mats and stuff to cut things out so that you don't see equipment and things like that. Like, it's mind boggling that
Yeah.
they pulled this off. It's a miracle that these movies happened, that original trilogy. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
it's, oh God, yeah, it's magic.
It really is. Yeah. Industrial Light and Magic is the perfect name for.
It's, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Very cool. We're probably gonna have to do this again sometime because, like I said, we barely scratched the surface on all the things that you've done.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I
game.
really
It was a lot of
appreciate it.
fun.
Yeah, really cool, really fun. I love the stuff you're doing.
Thank
People
you.
should definitely check out Regal Robot if you haven't.
That's a good idea. Listen to this guy. That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, thank you so much for coming on and staying up late so we could get this in.
It's my pleasure. I'm probably gonna now have to, because it is still May the 4th. I'm gonna actually go check in on email and then that Regal fan group on Facebook, make sure everybody's doing okay. But yeah. And if anybody listening wants to join us and say hi, go to Facebook, search the Regal Robot fan group. It'll come up and join us there. It is a good time. I promise you.
Very cool. Well, thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.